The alarm screamed through the command center like a dying animal. Red lights flashed on every wall. Admiral Quan looked at the main screen and felt his blood turn cold. 3 star systems were gone. Not destroyed. Gone. Where planets once spun, around their suns now there was only empty space. No rocks, no gas, no light. Nothing. Sir? The young officer's voice shook as she spoke. The readings they don't make sense. Quan walked to her station. On the screen, he saw what made her afraid. The energy readings showed something impossible. Something had eaten 3 entire solar systems, eaten the planets, the moons, the asteroids. Even the stars themselves were dimmer now, like someone had taken huge bites out of them. What could do this? Quan asked, but he already knew the answer. Every person in the galaxy knew the old stories, the legends that parents told their children to scare them into being good. The Warbeast. For 10,000 years it had slept somewhere in the dark between stars. The old races had fought it once, long ago. They had won, but barely. The creature had eaten entire civilizations before they finally found a way to make it sleep. Now it was awake. And it was hungry. The communication system buzzed to life. The voice that came through belonged to Chancellor Vex of the Galactic Council. Even through the speaker, Quan could hear the fear. All fleet commanders, this is an emergency. The ancient threat has returned. The Devourer moves toward the inner systems. Our greatest weapons have failed. Our strongest ships are destroyed. Quan's hands gripped the edge of his command chair. The Galactic Council had ships that could crack planets in half. They had weapons that could make stars explode. They had minds that could think faster than computers and see the future before it happened. If their weapons failed, what chance did Earth have? The creature is massive, Chancellor Vex continued. Our scouts report it is the size of a moon, but it moves like a living thing. It has armor that learns from every attack. When we hit it with fire, the armor becomes stronger against fire. When we use ice, it becomes stronger against cold. Every weapon we try only makes it harder to hurt. On the main screen, new images appeared. Quan saw the Warbeast for the first time, and his stomach turned. It looked like someone had taken a giant sea creature and covered it with metal and machines. Tentacles as thick as city buildings reached out from its body. Each tentacle ended in a mouth full of teeth that could bite through a battleship. But the worst part was its eyes. The creature had dozens of them, scattered across its body like stars in the night sky. They glowed with an evil light that seemed to look right through the screen and into Quan's soul. It feeds on energy, the Chancellor said. Every attack we make gives it more power. Our quantum cannons made it grow larger. Our psionic attacks made it smarter. We cannot fight this thing with force. The other fleet commanders started talking at once. Admiral Zorks of the Crystalline Empire suggested running away to the far edge of the galaxy. Commander Thys of the Hive Worlds wanted to gather every ship and attack together. General Crix thought they should surrender and hope the creature would be merciful. But Quan knew the truth. The Warbeast was not just hungry, it was angry. It had slept for 10,000 years, and now it wanted revenge on the galaxy that had dared to make it sleep. Where is it going? Quan asked, cutting through the other voices. The line went quiet for a moment. Then Chancellor Vex spoke again, and his voice was full of sadness. It is moving toward the Sol system. Earth. The creature was heading straight for Earth. Quan felt his heart stop. Earth was humanity's home world, but it was more than that. It was where his daughter lived, where his grandchildren played in gardens under blue skies, where millions of humans went about their daily lives, never knowing that death was coming for them from the stars. The Council has made a decision, Chancellor Vex said. We cannot save every world. We must focus our remaining forces on protecting the core systems, the Sol system. We must consider it an acceptable loss. Acceptable loss? Quan's voice came out as a growl. There are 8 billion humans on Earth alone. Admiral Quan, please understand. Humans are a young species. You have only been in space for 50 years. You do not have the weapons or knowledge to fight something like this. The Council believes your people should evacuate what they can and find new homes in other systems. Quan looked around his command center. His crew was made up of humans from every corner of Earth and its colonies. They came from different countries, spoke different languages, believed in different gods. But right now they all had the same look in their eyes. They were not going to run. Chancellor, Quan said slowly, with respect, the Council can take their acceptable losses and shove them into a black hole. Several alien voices started shouting at once, but Quan cut the communication. He turned to his crew and saw them all looking at him, waiting. You heard the alien, he said. They think we should pack up and find somewhere new to live. They think we're too young, too weak, too stupid to fight this thing. He walked to the main screen and stared at the image of the Warbeast. It was still far away, but getting closer every hour. Soon it would reach the outer planets of the Sol system, then the colonies on Mars and Europa, then Earth itself. Maybe they're right, Quan continued. Maybe we don't have fancy quantum weapons or psychic powers or ships that can think for themselves. Maybe we're just a bunch of primitives who learned to fly between the stars yesterday. He turned back to his crew and smiled. It was not a nice smile. It was the kind of smile his ancestors wore when they faced impossible odds and decided to fight anyway. But you know what we do have? We have something every other species in this galaxy forgot about. We have the kind of crazy that makes us look at impossible odds and ask, how hard can it be? The crew started to smile too. Not because they thought they could win, but because they were human and humans had never learned when to quit. Send a message to every human ship in the fleet, Quan ordered. Tell them the Alien Council thinks we should run away and hide. Tell them there's a monster coming for Earth and everyone says it can't be stopped. He paused and looked at each face around him, then asked them if they want to prove everyone wrong. The communication officer's fingers flew over her controls. Within minutes, responses started coming back from human ships across the system. The answers were all the same. Hell yes. Outside, the stars seemed a little brighter, as if they were watching. As if they wanted to see what these young, crazy humans would do when faced with the impossible. The Warbeast was coming. It had eaten civilizations that were old when Earth was young. It had survived weapons that could crack reality itself. But it had never faced humans before. And humans had a long history of doing things that should be impossible. Dr. Harin stared at the data scrolling across her screen and rubbed her tired eyes. She had been awake for 36 hours straight, studying every piece of information about the Warbeast that humanity could find. Ancient records from dead civilizations, battle reports from the last war 10,000 years ago, even children's stories from worlds that no longer existed. Everyone else was building weapons that would not work. Admiral Quan was gathering ships for a battle they could not win. The engineers were designing bombs that would only make the creature stronger. But Hayrin was looking for something different. She was looking for the one thing that might save them all. Doctor, you need to sleep, said her assistant, Jinwoo. He brought her another cup of coffee. Her 8th one today. I can sleep when we're all dead, Harin muttered, not looking away from her screen. Which will be in about 6 days if I can't figure this out. The Warbeast was getting closer. It had reached the outer edge of the Sol system and was feeding on the asteroid belt like a whale feeding on tiny fish. Each rock it ate made it a little bigger, a little stronger, a little hungrier. The worst part was watching it move. Harin had seen the video feeds from the scout ships. The creature moved through space like it was swimming through water. Its tentacles reached out and grabbed asteroids, pulled them into its many mouths, and crunched them up like candy. But there was something about the way it moved that bothered her, something that didn't match what the old report said. Jinwoo, pull up the feeding pattern analysis again, she said. Her assistant typed on his computer. The main screen showed a map of the asteroid belt with red dots marking where the Warbeast had eaten. At first glance, it looked random, like the creature was just grabbing whatever was closest. But Harin had been staring at this pattern for hours, and she was starting to see something else. It's not random, she whispered. What do you mean? Harin pointed at the screen. Look at the pattern. It's not eating everything. It's being picky, like it has favorite foods. She pulled up another screen showing the chemical composition of the asteroids. The ones the Warbeast ate first were rich in certain metals. The ones it ignored had different minerals. It has preferences, Haran said, excitement growing in her voice. That means it's not just a weapon. There's something organic about its behavior. Something. Animal. Jinwoo looked confused. But the reports say it's a biomechanical war machine, built by the ancient Vortok Empire to destroy their enemies. That's what everyone thinks, Haran said. But what if they're wrong? What if the Vortok didn't build it? What if they found something and changed it? She started pulling up more files, ancient genetic data from the creature's tissue samples, brain scans from the few times someone had managed to hurt it enough to get readings. Look at this, she said, pointing to a brain scan from 3,000 years ago. See these neural pathways? They're not artificial. They're organic. Old organic. Like really old. The scan showed a complex network of brain tissue buried deep inside the creature's mechanical parts. Most of it looked like the kind of computer circuits you'd expect from a war machine. But some parts looked different, simpler, more primitive. What am I looking at? Jinwoo asked. The original brain, Haran said. Before someone turned this thing into a weapon, it was something else. Something that lived and breathed and maybe even played. She started typing faster, pulling up comparison scans from Earth animals, dogs, cats, even dolphins. Jinwoo, what do you do when you want to train an animal? You teach it? Give it rewards when it does what you want? Right. But what if you want to make it mean? What if you want to turn a friendly animal into a killer? Jinwoo thought for a moment. You heard it. You make it angry and scared until it doesn't trust anyone. Haran nodded. The Vortok didn't build a war machine. They took something that was probably gentle and tortured it until it became a monster. For 10,000 years, this thing has been in pain and rage and fear. She stared at the brain scans, her heart breaking a little. Somewhere inside that massive, terrible creature was the mind of an animal that had once been innocent. An animal that had been hurt so badly and for so long that it forgot how to be anything but angry. But how does that help us? Jinwoo asked. Even if you're right, we can't exactly give it therapy. Haran was quiet for a long moment. Then she started typing again, this time pulling up files about animal behavior on Earth. Maybe we can't fix 10,000 years of torture, she said slowly. But maybe we can remind it what it used to be. Meanwhile, on the other side of the solar system, Captain Jin-Ha was having the worst day of his life. His job was supposed to be simple. Evacuate civilians from the outer colonies before the Warbeast arrived. Get them to safety. Try not to think about the fact that there was nowhere in the galaxy that would be safe if humanity failed to stop this thing, but nothing was going according to plan. The colony on Europa had refused to leave. This is our home, the governor had said. We're not abandoning it for some space monster. The mining station on Ceres had panicked and launched their escape pods too early. Now Jin-Ha's ship was crowded with 300 miners who were asking every 5 minutes if they were safe yet. And worst of all, they had lost contact with the research station on Titan. Jin-Ha's ship was the closest one that could check on them. Captain, said his pilot, we're approaching Titan now. But sir, I'm getting some strange readings. Jin-Ha looked at the scanner display and felt his stomach drop. The research station was gone, not destroyed, gone. Like someone had taken a huge bite out of the moon. It's moving faster than we thought, Jin-Ha said quietly. They found survivors in an escape pod drifting near where the station used to be. Only 12 people out of the 300 who had lived there. Among them was a small boy, maybe 5 years old, clutching a worn teddy bear. What's your name, son? Jin-Ha asked gently as the medical team checked the boy for injuries. Minho, the boy said in a small voice. Where are my parents? Jin-Ha looked at the medical officer, who shook her head sadly. The boy's parents had been in the part of the station that was eaten first. You're going to stay with us for a while, Minho, Jin-Ha said. We're going to keep you safe. The boy nodded and hugged his teddy bear tighter. He seemed strangely calm for a child who had just lost everything. But Jin-Ha had seen that look before, during the war on Mars. It was the look of someone who was too shocked to understand how bad things really were. As their ship headed back toward Earth, Jinha stood at the window looking out at the stars. Somewhere out there, the Warbeast was getting closer. In a few days, it would reach the inner planets. Then Earth itself. He thought about Minho, sleeping in the medical bay. The boy had lost his parents, his home, everything he had ever known, and soon he might lose his entire species. But Jinha was human, and humans had a stubborn habit of refusing to give up, even when everything seemed hopeless. "We'll find a way," he whispered to the stars. "Somehow we'll find a way." Behind him, little Minho stirred in his sleep and hugged his teddy bear closer. In his dreams, he was playing with his parents' dog back on Titan, teaching it to sit and stay and roll over. He had always been good with animals. The Warbeast was 3 days away from Earth, and time was running out. The Warbeast filled the sky above Earth like a second moon made of nightmares. Admiral Quan stood on the bridge of his flagship and watched humanity's final battle begin. Every weapon they had was firing at once. Nuclear missiles streaked through, space like angry stars. Plasma cannons painted the darkness with lines of blue fire. Particle beams that could cut through mountains struck the creature's armored hide. Nothing worked. The nuclear explosions looked like tiny firecrackers against the creature's massive body. The plasma fire washed over its armor like water off a duck's back. The particle beams left scratches that healed before Quan could blink. "Sir," his weapons officer called out, "all batteries are firing at maximum power. We're not even slowing it down." Quan gritted his teeth. He had known this would happen. Dr. Harin had warned them that conventional weapons would be useless, but they had to try. They were human. Trying impossible things was what humans did. "Keep firing," he ordered. "If we're going down, we go down, fighting." The creature's tentacles reached toward Earth like the fingers of some cosmic god. Each tentacle was bigger than a city, covered in armor that sparkled with absorbed energy from humanity's weapons. As Quan watched, one of the tentacles touched Earth's atmosphere and began to glow. It was starting to feed. Down on Earth's surface, the sky turned red as the creature's feeding began. The air itself seemed to get thicker, harder to breathe. Plants started to wither. The oceans began to boil. Captain Jinha's damaged shuttle tumbled through the burning atmosphere above Seoul. The evacuation had failed. There was nowhere left to run. The creature was too big, too fast, too hungry. "Brace for impact," Jinha shouted to his passengers. The shuttle hit the ground hard, bouncing twice before sliding to a stop in what used to be a beautiful park. Now, the trees were black and twisted, and the sky above looked like the inside of a furnace. Jinha pulled himself out of his seat and looked around. Most of his passengers were hurt, but alive. The medical team was already helping the injured. In the corner, little Minho sat quietly, still holding his teddy bear. "Is everyone okay?" Jinha called out. "Hull breach in Section 3, his co-pilot reported. "We're not flying anywhere soon." Through the broken windows, Jinha could see one of the creature's feeding tentacles descending from the sky. It was still miles away, but it looked close, enough to touch. The tentacle moved slowly, deliberately, like a snake choosing where to strike. "We need to move," Jinha said. "Find shelter in the city ruins." But as they gathered their supplies, Jinha noticed something wrong. Minho was not moving. The little boy sat in his seat, staring out the window at the approaching tentacle. "Minho," Jinha said gently, "we need to go now." The boy looked up at him with those big, serious eyes. "It's scared," he said. Jinha blinked. "What?" "The big animal. It's scared and angry and hurt." Minho pointed at the tentacle, like Buster was after the bad men hurt him. Jinha remembered Buster. He had been the station dog on Titan before the creature ate the whole moon. Buster had been attacked by some drunk miners once. After that, the friendly dog had become mean and suspicious, snapping at anyone who tried to pet him. "Minho, that's not a dog," Jinha said. "That's the thing that took your parents." The boy nodded sadly. "I know, but it's still scared." Before Jinha could stop him, Minho stood up and walked toward the shuttle's broken door. Outside, the feeding tentacle was getting closer. It was maybe half a mile away now, and Jinha could see the details of its armor. Metal plates that shifted and moved like living skin. Sensors that glowed like angry eyes. Weapon systems that could level a city block. "Minho, come back!" Jinha reached for the boy, but Minho was already outside. The little boy walked across the ruined park, his teddy bear tucked under one arm. Above him, the tentacle continued its descent. It was close enough now that its shadow covered the entire area, close enough that Jinha could hear the hum of its power systems, close enough to kill them all with a casual swipe. Jinha ran after the boy, but his injured leg slowed him down. "Minho, wait!" The tentacle sensed movement below and turned toward them. Sensors along its length focused on the small human child walking across the broken ground. Weapon systems charged up. The creature's vast intelligence analyzed this tiny threat and found it harmless. But something made the tentacle pause. Minho stopped walking when the tentacle was directly above him. The armored tip, big as a subway car, lowered until it was just a few feet from his face. Up close, Jinha could see that the armor was not just metal. There were organic parts too. Flesh and bone mixed with circuits and steel. Eyes that looked almost familiar. The boy looked up at this impossible nightmare without fear. He tilted his head to one side, the way children do when they are thinking hard about something. "You don't want to hurt people," Minho said to the creature. His voice was quiet, but somehow it seemed to carry through the air. "Someone made you hurt people. But you don't want to." The tentacle twitched. Deep inside the creature's hybrid brain, something stirred. A memory so old and buried that it had almost forgotten it existed. A memory of running through green fields, under a blue sky. A memory of playing. A memory of being loved. "They hurt you for a long, long time," Minho continued. "Until you forgot how to be good. But you remember now, don't you?" Jinha stopped running. He could see something impossible happening. The tentacle's armor was changing color, from angry red to a softer blue. The weapons systems were powering down. The sensors were focusing, not on threat assessment, but on the small boy's face. Minho reached into his pocket and pulled out something small. A dog biscuit. He had been saving it for Buster, back when Buster was still alive. "I know you're not really a dog," the boy said, "but you're still a good animal inside, and good animals deserve treats." He held out the biscuit toward the massive tentacle. The tentacle stared at the tiny offering. In all its 10,000 years of existence, no one had ever offered it food. It had only ever taken what it needed through violence and fear. Minho smiled the way children smile at friendly animals. Then he spoke with the absolute certainty that only children possess, the kind of certainty that comes from never learning that some things are impossible. "Sit," he said. The word hung in the air like a magic spell. The tentacle trembled. Every system in the creature's vast body suddenly focused on this moment, on this word, on this impossible command, given without fear or doubt or compromise. Deep, in the creature's brain, something that had been broken for 10,000 years suddenly remembered what it felt like to be loved. Slowly, impossibly, the tentacle lowered itself toward the ground. Above Earth, the Warbeast stopped feeding. Across the planet, the red sky began to clear. The oceans stopped boiling. The air became easier to breathe. For the first time in galactic history, the unstoppable force had stopped. Not because of superior weapons or ancient magic or divine intervention, but because a human child had looked at a monster and seen a hurt animal that needed kindness. Jinha stared in amazement as Minho patted the armored tip of the tentacle and said, "Good boy." The creature that had devoured civilizations made a sound like a contented sigh. Everything had changed. And it all started with one word: sit. The news traveled faster than light across the galaxy. On 1,000 different worlds and 1,000,000 different languages, the same impossible story was being told. The Warbeast had stopped. A human child had spoken one word, and the terror that had devoured civilizations for 10,000 years had simply sat down. In the crystal palaces of Zephyr Prime, the High Council called an emergency meeting. In the hive cities of Carbon-7, a million insect minds buzzed with confusion. On the gas giant Typhon, the floating cities of the Windriders shook with disbelief. Everyone wanted to know the same thing. How? Chancellor Vex of the Galactic Council stood before the largest gathering of alien races in recorded history. Representatives from every corner of the galaxy had come to hear the explanation. The room was so big it had its own weather system, and so full that some delegates had to float in zero-gravity sections near the ceiling. The human child, Chancellor Vex began, his forearms shaking slightly, spoke a single word to the creature. The word was sit in their primitive language. According to our instruments, there was no psychic energy involved. No advanced technology, no ancient magic, just a word. A delegate from the thinking machines raised a metallic hand. Chancellor, this makes no logical sense. Our quantum computers have run 1,000,000 simulations. The probability of stopping the Warbeast with verbal commands is less than 0. And yet, Chancellor Vex said quietly, it worked. The room erupted in arguments. The psychic races claimed it must have been some unknown human mind power. The technology-based civilizations insisted there had to be a hidden device involved. The energy beings suggested that humans had made a deal with cosmic forces beyond understanding. But on Earth, Dr. Harin knew the truth was both simpler and more terrifying than any alien theory. She stood in her laboratory, watching the video feed from Sol for the 100th time. Little Min-Ho approaching the massive tentacle. The creatures, weapons powering down. The moment when everything changed. It's not about psychic powers, she said to the gathered scientists around her. It's not about technology or magic or making deals with gods. She paused the video at the exact moment Min-Ho said, sit. On the screen, she could see the boy's face. No fear, no doubt, just complete, absolute certainty that he would be obeyed. It's about something the galaxy forgot existed, Harin continued. Pure, stubborn, unshakable belief. Her assistant Jin Woo looked confused. But doctor, how can belief stop a creature like that? Harin smiled sadly. Because the creature spent 10,000 years being told it was a monster, being treated like a weapon, being hurt and scared and angry until it forgot what it used to be, and then a human child looked at it and saw something different. She brought up another screen showing the creature's brain scans from that moment. The patterns were unlike anything in the medical databases. Look at this, she said, pointing to the neural activity. When Min-Ho spoke, something woke up deep in the creature's original brain, something that had been sleeping for millennia, the part of it that remembered being innocent. The other scientists leaned forward to study the readings. What they saw made no sense according to everything they knew about psychology and neuroscience. The creature's brain had literally rewired itself in seconds, old pathways coming back to life while others went dormant. Other species in the galaxy learned to work around limitations, Harin explained. They developed technology to overcome obstacles. They found ways to accept what they couldn't change, but humans? We evolved differently. She walked to the window and looked out at the city of Sol. It was being rebuilt already, because that's what humans did. They fixed things. They refused to accept defeat. We evolved by refusing to believe limitations exist in the first place, she said. Every other species looks at the impossible and asks, how can we work around this? Humans look at the impossible and ask, why is everyone being so negative? Meanwhile, in the ruins of the park where everything had changed, Captain Jinha watched the most amazing sight of his life. Min-Ho was teaching the Warbeast tricks. The massive creature had coiled its tentacles into a rough sitting position, making itself smaller so the boy could reach its sensors. When Min-Ho held up his hand and said stay, the creature froze completely. When he said down, it lowered its body even further. Other children had started to arrive. Word had spread through the refugee camps that the monster was friendly now. Kids who had lost their homes and families were walking up to the creature that had destroyed their worlds and patting its armored hide like it was a giant puppy. Good boy, a little girl named Sujin said as she fed the creature a candy bar. One of its many mouths took the offering gently, careful not to hurt her, with its building-sized teeth. Jinha shook his head in amazement. The greatest military minds in the galaxy had tried to stop this thing with weapons that could crack planets. Children were stopping it with dog treats and kind words. His communication device buzzed. Messages were pouring in from across human space. Every news network in the galaxy wanted interviews. Scientists wanted to study the phenomenon. Military leaders wanted to know if it could be weaponized. But the message that caught Jinha's attention came from Admiral Quan. "Captain," the Admiral's voice crackled through the speaker, "I need you to ask the boy something. The alien delegates are going crazy trying to understand what happened. They want to know if humans have been hiding some kind of secret weapon." Jinha walked over to where Minho was playing fetch with the creature, throwing asteroids that it would catch in its tentacles and bring back to him. "Minho," Jinha said gently, "some important people want to ask you questions about your new friend here." The boy looked up from his game. "What kind of questions?" "They want to know how you knew the creature would listen to you." Minho thought about this seriously, the way children do when adults ask them to explain something that seems obvious. "It wasn't hard," he said finally. "Animals always listen if you're nice to them and you really mean what you say." "But how? Did you know it was an animal?" "Everyone else thought it was just a machine." Minho pointed to one of the creature's many eyes. "It looked sad," he said simply. "Machines don't look sad." Jinha stared at the boy. That was it. That was the secret that had baffled the greatest minds in the galaxy. A 5-year-old human child had looked at the most feared weapon in galactic history and seen that it was sad. "Can you tell that to the important people?" Jinha asked. Minho shrugged. "Sure, but they probably won't believe me. Adults never believe kids about animals." As if to prove his point, the creature gently nuzzled the boy with the tip of one tentacle, the way a dog might nuzzle its favorite human. Minho giggled and scratched what might have been the creature's chin. Jinha sent his report back to Admiral Quan. He could imagine the chaos it would cause when the alien delegates heard it. They would demand detailed explanations of human psychology. They would want to study children to understand their power. They would try to turn empathy into a weapon. But they would miss the point completely. The real secret wasn't that humans had some special ability. It was that humans had never learned to stop trying impossible things. Other species had spent millions of years learning wisdom and caution. Humans had spent their entire existence looking at walls and asking, "What if we just walked through them anyway?" That night, as the Warbeast settled down to sleep in Earth's orbit like a mountain-sized guard dog, Jinha sat with Minho and watched the stars. "Are you proud of what you did today?" Jinha asked. Minho hugged his teddy bear and thought about, "I just helped a hurt animal," he said. "That's what you're supposed to do." Above them, the creature that had once been the galaxy's greatest nightmare hummed contentedly in its sleep, dreaming for the first time in 10,000 years of playing in green fields under blue skies. The galaxy was learning what it meant to be human, and it was more terrifying than any weapon they had ever faced. 6 months after the day that changed everything, Admiral Quan stood on the observation deck of Luna Station and watched the most impossible sight in the galaxy. The creature that used to be called the Warbeast was playing fetch. It floated in Earth's asteroid belt like a mountain-sized puppy, using its tentacles to catch chunks of rock that the human children threw for it. When it caught one, it would bring the asteroid back and hover expectantly until someone said, "Good boy," and threw another one. The children had named it Big Dog, and the name had stuck. Even the news reports were calling it that now. "Still, can't believe it," said Captain Jinha, joining Quan at the window. 6 months ago, that thing was eating entire star systems. Now it's playing fetch with kids. Quan nodded. "The galaxy's still trying to figure out how we did it." Through the window, they could see Minho floating in a small spacesuit, teaching Big Dog to roll over. It was a complicated maneuver for something the size of a moon, but the creature was trying its best, rotating slowly in space, while the boy clapped his hands in delight. "Any word from the Galactic Council?" Jinha asked. Quan's smile faded a little. "They want to study it. They've sent 17 different research teams to examine the human pacification technique. They still think we use some kind of secret weapon. The truth was both simpler and more terrifying than any weapon. Dr. Harin's research had proven what Minho had known from the beginning. The Warbeast had never been evil. It had been hurt, scared, and alone for so long that it had forgotten how to be anything else. All it had taken was one human child who looked at a monster and saw a friend. But the aliens couldn't accept that. They needed complicated explanations involving advanced technology or hidden psychic powers. The idea that kindness could be stronger than weapons didn't fit into their understanding of how the universe worked. "There's something else," Quan said, quietly. "Intelligence reports say other species are trying to copy what we did. The Zephyrians have built machines that can speak in human command tones. The hive worlds are training their young to give orders with human certainty levels." Jinha shook his head. "They still don't get it." "No," Quan agreed. "They don't." Down in the research lab, Dr. Harin was finishing her final report on the Warbeast incident. She had spent months studying every aspect of what happened, and her conclusions were going to shock the scientific community. The creature's transformation was not the result of advanced human technology, she dictated to her computer. It was not caused by psychic abilities or genetic modifications. It was the result of something much more dangerous. Pure, uncompromising human stubbornness. She paused and looked at the data on her screen. Brain scans showing how the creature's neural pathways had rewired themselves. Chemical analysis proving that its aggressive hormones had dropped to almost zero. Video footage of a monster becoming a pet through the power of unconditional kindness. Other species evolved by learning to accept limitations, she continued. They developed wisdom, caution, and sophisticated ways to work within the rules of reality. But humans evolved differently. We evolved by refusing to acknowledge that rules exist until after we've already broken them. Her assistant Jin Wu looked up from his own work. "Doctor, do you really think that's what makes us special? Just being too stubborn to quit?" Harin smiled. "Jin Wu, let me ask you something. If someone told you that befriending a galactic terror weapon was impossible, what would you do?" "Well, I'd probably try to find a way to do it anyway," Jin Wu admitted. "Exactly. You wouldn't accept that it was impossible. You'd look for loopholes, alternatives, or just charge ahead and hope for the best. That's what makes us human." She pulled up a new file on her computer. Reports were coming in from across human space about other impossible things that humans had accomplished in the past 6 months. A human engineer had fixed a crystalline empire ship that their own technicians said was beyond repair. A human diplomat had negotiated peace between two species that had been at war for 1,000 years. A human child had taught a supposedly unintelligent robot to paint pictures. The galaxy spent millions of years learning what couldn't be done, Harin said. We spent our entire existence refusing to learn that lesson. Outside Luna Station, Big Dog was getting restless. It had been 6 months since its last real meal, and asteroids didn't provide much nutrition. But the creature had learned something new: patience. When it got hungry, the humans would find it something better to eat. They always did. Minho floated nearby, reading the creature a story from his tablet. It was about a lonely dragon who found a family of brave knights. The dragon in the story had been mean and scary at first, but the knights saw that it was really just sad and afraid. Big Dog listened with all of its many eyes focused on the boy. It couldn't understand the words, but it understood the kindness in the child's voice. For the first time in 10,000 years, the creature felt safe. Other children had joined them. Sujin, who had lost her parents in the Mars attack. Taewon, who had escaped from the Europa colony just before it was destroyed. Dozens of kids who had lost everything to the creature that was now their best friend. None of them seemed to think. It was strange. To them, Big Dog was just another animal that needed love and care. The fact that it had once been the galaxy's most feared weapon didn't matter. What mattered was that it was lonely, and they could fix that. Back in the observation, Deck Admiral Quan received a priority message from Earth. The Galactic Council wanted to hold a special assembly. They wanted humans to explain their pacification technology to the galaxy. Quan sighed. Jinha, you're going to represent humanity at the assembly. Me? Sir, I'm just a transport captain. Shouldn't we send a scientist? Or a diplomat? No, Quan said, watching Minho teach Big Dog to shake hands with its tentacle. Send someone who understands what really happened here. A week later, Captain Jinha stood before the largest gathering of alien races in galactic history. The assembly hall stretched for miles in every direction, filled with beings of every shape and size imaginable. Crystalline entities that looked like living gemstones. Gas-based life forms that floated in protective bubbles. Machine intelligences that existed as pure thought. All of them wanted to know humanity's secret. Honorable delegates, Jinha began, his voice carried by speakers to every corner of the vast hall. You have asked me to explain how humans stopped the Warbeast. You want to know about our advanced weapons, our secret technologies, our hidden powers. The hall fell silent. Thousands of alien eyes focused on the human standing at the podium. The truth is, Jinha continued, we don't have any of those things. What we have is something you've all forgotten how to use. A murmur ran through the crowd. Several delegates demanded clarification. We have the ability to look at something everyone says is impossible and ask why not. Jinha said, you spent millions of years learning wisdom and caution. You learned to accept limitations and work within them. You became very good at avoiding failure. He paused and looked around the hall at all the advanced, sophisticated civilizations that had given up before they even tried. But humans never learned when to quit, he said. We look at walls and try to walk through them. We see problems that can't be solved and solve them anyway. We meet monsters and try to make friends with them. The hall erupted in confusion. Delegates demanded scientific explanations. They wanted data, formulas, technological specifications. There is no technology, Jinha said firmly. There is no secret weapon. There is only this. When a human child saw the galaxy's greatest terror, he didn't see a monster. He saw a hurt animal that needed help. And he helped it. An ancient being from the core worlds rose to speak. This is impossible. Our calculations show that the Warbeast could not be stopped through conventional means. Jinha smiled. That's the difference between humans and everyone else. You calculate whether something is possible before you try it. We try it first, and let the universe figure out whether it was possible later. The assembly continued for hours, but Jinha's message was simple. Humans didn't stop the Warbeast because they were stronger or smarter or more advanced. They stopped it because they never learned that some things can't be stopped. Years later, when Minho was grown up and had children of his own, he would take them to visit Big Dog in the asteroid belt. The creature was old now and gentle, spending its days helping human ships navigate through dangerous space and protecting Earth from cosmic threats. Tell us the story again, Dad, his daughter would say. Tell us about the day you met Big Dog. And Minho would tell them about the day when everything seemed hopeless, when the greatest terror in the galaxy was coming to destroy their world, and how he stopped it with a single word. But why did it work? His son would ask. Minho would smile and ruffle the boy's hair, because sometimes the most important thing you can do is refuse to believe that something is impossible. The universe has a funny way of making room for people who are too stubborn to give up. Above them, Big Dog would float peacefully among the stars, dreaming of green fields and blue skies, grateful for the day when a human child looked at a monster and saw a friend. That was what it meant to be human, not the strongest species in the galaxy or the smartest or the most advanced, but the species that looked at the word impossible and asked, "Are you sure about that?" In a universe full of ancient wisdom and sophisticated technology, humans brought something that had almost been forgotten, the simple, stubborn belief that anything could be changed if you cared enough to try. The galaxy learned that day that humans weren't just another species among thousands. They were the species that refused to learn their limitations, the species that made friends with monsters and turned weapons into pets and looked at 10,000 years of established fact and said, "That's nice, but we're going to do it differently." They were the species that wrote their name across the stars not in letters of conquest or technology, but in acts of impossible kindness and unshakable hope, and the universe would never be the same.